Okay, good morning, everyone. So we're going to start slightly differently. And this morning, we're going to consider something that I think is incredibly simple, something that all of you have done naturally, maybe with a little bit of effort, but generally naturally this morning already. We're going to consider why we come. Why do we come to church? Now, this whole thing was birthed last week. So some of us will gather before the service to pray together. And once we'd finished praying, we came in and I went and sat with my family because Mark was leading the service. I didn't really know what to do. I didn't really know what to do with my hands when we sang. I didn't really know how to stand in the pew. It's been a long time since I'd been there. And so I sat down and I just jotted in my journal, how do we come? How do we come to church? How do we come before God? How do we come to the feet of Jesus? Because actually, I think it's really important that we just take a moment to think about how we come. Now, please don't panic. I'm not going to preach before we send the kids out. But I did want the kids to be here for this little thought. Because how we come is important. Some of us will come like this. Mark 10 reads like this. People were bringing little children to Jesus for him to place his hands on them, but the disciples rebuked them. The age-old biblical church principle of children should be seen, but not heard. You see, some of us have already come to church today crabby. We lost an hour of sleep. We are not good when we've not had enough sleep. Some of us are already just teetering on the edge, simmering under the surface, just waiting for something to happen that will allow us to let out a relaxing tut at someone else or a huff of the cheeks. Some of us will come with a level of fear, hoping that the kids are sent out quickly this morning before they can cause too much disruption. Hoping that the pastor won't do that awkward thing where they say, before I pray, we're just going to have a moment of silence, which is every parent's worst fear on a Sunday morning. It's fascinating, isn't it? Some come crabby, others come fearful. Same church building, same God, same songs, yet already we can see that we come with different attitudes, different expectations, different understandings. Before we begin our time of sung worship, let's just remember how Mark 10 plays out. People were bringing little children to Jesus for him to place his hands on them, but the disciples rebuked them. When Jesus saw this, he was indignant. He said to them, "Let the little children come to me and do not hinder them. For the kingdom of God belongs to such as these." So we're going to start this morning by welcoming our kids. And there's not massively Joel's around, that's fine, I can look that way as well. So welcome, it's lovely to have you with us. If you are under 10, can you cheer? Honestly, if I said, can we have a moment of silence, you'd be Larry. Okay, under 20, can you cheer? Is there anyone here under 20? I mean, where are you guys at now? 21. Okay, under 25? There we are. Okay, close enough. I expected that to be Bedlam. So you guys are going to go out later in our service, you youngsters. I just wanted you to know you're very welcome to be with us this morning. And we're super excited that you're part of our church family. And likewise, those of you who are older who will be staying in here, welcome. Welcome to church. Welcome to being a part of Moriah with us this morning. And I just want you to stop and think as we started this morning like this. Uncomfortable. Because sometimes we come knowing how church will go. We'll arrive at 11:05 because we never start on time. I'll sit in my pew. I know where my pew is. The pastor will come and welcome. He'll say a short prayer and then we'll stand to sing. And I know how it's going to be, so I can come comfortable. God will fit into my box. Maybe this morning we come a little bit more expectant, a little bit less confident in what we know, and a little bit more dependent on who he is. As we come to church, as we come to spend time in the presence of God, as we come to worship him. So here we go again. Part 2 of our message already this morning, which is good going. You could probably chalk this off as 2 Sundays if you needed to. But we're asking that question of how do we come? How do we come? I wonder if we were honest with ourselves, how often we even consider that question, because it's become so natural for so many of us just to come. I can say that with a level of confidence because you are all here. And my hope is you will continue to come, and that you'll continue to come to times of prayer, times in the scripture, in your own personal lives, as well as this gathered time together. But it's an important question for us to begin to wrestle with, I think. How do we come? Laura and I, before we moved to Wales, went to a church in Weston, and it's a sad truth that we would spend every Sunday morning coming to church afraid that you would be in trouble for something you'd done in the week. It's a sad reality. That was the truth for us for a good 15 years of church attendance. We've already talked this morning about parents sometimes come afraid, as Chris so eloquently put it, into God's house for fear the children might make too much noise. I don't want us to rest on those fearful attitudes, though. Instead, I want us to look at how we come before God. How do we, as people, all of you individually, this is a message that's relevant to every single person because you are here. How do we come before God? It's important to have these moments to reflect, to stop, to remember, because we don't want to come to church out of routine. Some of us do, but we don't want to get caught in routine. We don't want to come to church because somehow we feel we need to make sure we get a tick in God's holy register of church attendance. We don't want to just come because we think we need to play some sort of church game. So how do you come? How have you come this morning? Are you excited? Expectant? Grudgingly? Tired? Passionate? Despondent? However you have come, you are in good company, because I guarantee there is probably someone else in the building who may not be as willing to admit it, but someone else in the building who will feel the same or similar to you. What's even more encouraging is if we actually spend any time in the biblical text, we realize consistently people come to Jesus or they come into the presence of God and they come with something going on. No one arrives neutral. Everyone comes with something. So how do you come to God? Maybe you come like this chap that we read of in Mark 10. As Jesus started on his way, a man ran up to him and fell on his knees before him. "Good teacher," he asked, "what must I do to inherit eternal life?" "Why do you call me good?" Jesus answered. "No one is good except God alone. You know the commandments. You shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, you shall not give false testimony, you shall not defraud. Honor your father and your mother." "Teacher, he declared, all these I have kept since I was a boy." I wonder if you come like this guy. I like to picture this guy, and I've preached about him here a few times, but I've always thought he appears very much like a firework. He comes across like a firework. There's that whiz moment and then that bang moment. He comes and we read, he comes running. He comes running. He is excited. He wants to be where Jesus is. He has made an effort to be where Jesus is, so much so that he has run. And we understand that he acknowledges who Jesus is because he falls on his knees before him. He has made the effort to run and he has fallen on his knees before him. We have the whiz, and then we have the bang. What must I do to inherit eternal life? Jesus responds, "You shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, you shall not give false testimony, you shall not defraud. Honor your father and mother." "Teacher," he declared. I imagine starting to speak before Jesus has even finished. "Teacher," he declared, "all these I have kept since I was a boy." How many of us come standing firm on all we have done? How many of us are sat here or stood here this morning going, "You know what? I'm all right in this place because I went on mission. I pray, and I've read my Bible all the way through using a Bible study. How many of us are very confident of all the things we have done? Because that's what this young man is doing. Coming to Jesus, stood firm on all he has done. Justified in his own head to be in the very presence of Jesus because of what he has done. The sad truth is this: a firework, whilst incredibly spectacular as it whizzes off into the sky, explodes in the air, and then allows all that bright light, eventually it will just drift back to earth. Quietly. With no fanfare. Jesus looked at him and loved him. One thing you lack, he said. Go sell everything you have and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come follow me. At this, the man's face fell. He went away sad because he had great wealth. How many of us come with a back catalogue of good Christian heritage? But we arrive hard-hearted. We arrive hard-hearted because everything we've done allows us to come into this place comfortably, but we've become hard-hearted. We're not listening to what Jesus may be calling us to next. That's what's happening here. This person has come into the presence of God. They've come before Jesus, and Jesus has given them something to go away and do, and they have actually gone, you know what, despite the fact I've lived my entire life following the commands, I am not willing to hear a new thing. How many of us come so strong in what we have done, we forget to see that Jesus isn't finished yet? How do we come? How many of us come with this attitude? That means as we hear the challenges on a Sunday morning, or as we spend time in the biblical text at home, and yet we leave that moment despondent, unwilling to hear a fresh challenge, unwilling to be pushed in a new direction, unwilling to try a new door, unwilling to show discipline in that area of our lives. How many of us come from the past? Please hear me. This isn't a message of judgment. My hope is this is just one of those messages that reminds us that there is always more going on. That we recognize how easily we can fall into these patterns and how important it is to be aware of how we approach God. Maybe for some sat here, you are struggling. Where are we? 11:30. Maybe today's already been bad. We lost an hour of sleep, so all of us are on a fairly level peg there. Maybe for some of us, 2023 can already do one. 3 months in, whatever we are, 4 months in, we're done. It's been a rubbish year. Already looking forward to 2024. Maybe that's how you come to Jesus. Maybe like this. John 11, on his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now, Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, and many Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them on the loss of their brother. When Martha heard Jesus coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home. Lord, Martha said to Jesus, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. How many of us come with the if only approach to Jesus? If only you had been here sooner. If only you'd answered that prayer. If only you'd saved that person. If only you'd given me that job. If only. We come to Jesus with an if only. If you had been here, my brother would not have died. How many of us come with that mentality? I want you to hear something very clear here. Martha comes to Jesus with her hurt. This is a real emotion. It teaches us something crucial. It is okay to bring the reality of where we are at before God. It is okay to come with those hurts. The Psalms are a collection of deeply honest writings, sometimes incredibly uncomfortable to read. Why? Because they are someone letting out the truth of how they feel. I think all of us could learn something from Martha in the way we approach. Because there will be some here who have been greeted on the door with a smile on their face. They'd have sat and they'd have listened to the start of the message and chuckled at the children not making a noise. And they would have sung the songs and they'd have bowed their heads as Chris and Joel prayed, but the truth is you are sat there living. But you dare not say anything out loud. We can learn from Martha that it's okay to come to God with the reality of how we are feeling. It's okay to come feeling disappointed and let down. To come to those times in chapel, in prayer, with those rage-filled cries towards heaven that don't make a huge amount of sense. It's okay to come like that. It's okay to come like that because we need to be aware that this isn't the end of what Martha says to Jesus. It's okay to come with that honesty and that brutal truth of actually, I feel really let down by you, God. Because when she finishes, she says this, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now, God will give you the reason we can come to God is the reality of how we really are. He doesn't believe that way. How do we come is so important. Coming with honesty before God is so crucial. But it is not that we just simply come to have a whinge. We're willing to come with a belief that even in that truth of the hurt and the pain and the despondency, God can make a way. God can make a way forward. Martha is brutally honest with Jesus. The first thing she says to him, if you had been here sooner, there would have been no death. But I know that even now, God will give you whatever you ask. Coming with disappointment and hurt doesn't mean we have to leave with it. Oftentimes the truth is this, we come with disappointment, hurt, and we leave with disappointment and hurt because we've never once addressed the fact we rocked up with disappointment and hurt. We've buried it, we've smiled, we've drank tea and coffee together, and then we've gone feeling exactly the same way we came. Have you come to church this morning willing to be honest with God? Have you also come willing to listen to what he has to say? To believe he is still the God of the universe with a plan and purpose for your life, despite that hurt, that fear, that frustration. The more time I've spent in this idea of a message, as I said, all started last Sunday. I find it fascinating how we come. There's so many here, and I know you well enough. It's almost as natural as breathing. You wake up on a Sunday and you get dressed, and maybe you have breakfast, maybe you don't, and you get in the car or you go out the door to walk and you turn up here. For some of us, we may well rock up and go, I don't really know how I got there. It's become so natural to us. Please hear me, I'm not saying anything about that it's not good to come to church. But we do need to consider, how do we come? Why do we come? What do we come expecting? The Bible is full of people encountering, coming to Jesus. Maybe this morning you come like this. Just then, a woman who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years came up behind him and touched the edge of his cloak. She said to herself, if only I touch his cloak, I will be healed. If only I touch his cloak. I wonder how many of us come to church, come to those times of prayer, desperate for a touch of Jesus. We come broken, and we are desperate for a touch of Jesus, willing to reach out just to try and touch the hem of his cloak, believing that that alone would have an impact. Do we come to church expectant, desperate to be in the presence of Jesus in this gathered way? I'll be honest with you, this woman fills me with incredible joy and hope. She fills me with huge joy because I grew up in an understanding that the only way to deal with stuff would be to tell everyone publicly. I can guarantee you at 39, nearly 40, but at 39, there are many things I would not want to share publicly. She doesn't tell the world why she's come to Jesus. Yeah, confession, prayer, good disciplines. But sometimes it's okay to come quietly in amongst the crowd. dealing with what we've got in the presence of Jesus. Fills me with great joy because she simply comes. Fills me with incredible hope because in simply coming, she does not leave the same way she arrived. This woman had carried the shame of her bleeding. She didn't want to make a big song and dance about the battles that she was facing. And yet she came. She came desperate for an encounter with Jesus. She came desperate, knowing that simply a touch could change everything. This woman had carried that shame, and yet we notice here, she comes really without fear. She's willing to come through the crowd and reach out. Now, I'm not saying there wasn't some stuff going on inside her emotionally, but she comes willing to reach out and touch the hem of his garment. How many of us come desperate, expectant that even the faintest encounter this morning with Jesus could change everything? How many of us come believing that? How when you spend reading your Bible? Have you come with the expectation that even the faintest of encounters with Jesus this morning in this place now could change everything? Do we still believe in that God? Is that still why we gather? Is that still why we come before him? Because we believe, like this woman did, that an encounter with him will change everything. Do we truly believe that? Because if we begin to even embrace that, what happens next is incredible. Jesus turned and saw her. Take heart, daughter, he said. Your faith has healed you. And the woman was healed at that moment. A humble approach, a humble desire to encounter Jesus. And yet Jesus turns his face towards her, speaks directly to her. But notice something incredibly important in this piece of the text. It's not her attendance that healed her. It's not the fact she came. It's the fact that she was faithful. She came faithfully. She came believing God could change things. Again, Martha comes to Jesus and says, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I've come to you believing that you can still change things. Friends, if you're coming to church and leaving church and nothing is happening, I promise you it's not because God is not here. I'm afraid it's with you. Because we see time and time again, people encounter Jesus, and when they open themselves up to him, there is transformation. And when they shut themselves down, they walk away. How do you come? Have you come this morning with a faith in the power of Jesus to continue to act in your life? Have you come this morning genuinely believing that the power of Jesus could change, impact, affect your life? Have you come believing that the way you walked into this building is not the same way you need to leave this building, not because of the preaching and not because of the worship and not because of the prayers, but because of who God is? All of these things help. But have you come believing that life can be transformed because of that encounter with Jesus? You see, if we were to stop, and if we did nothing else as a church for the next couple of weeks or months, and just read the Gospels, just spent time in the Gospels, we would see time and time again people coming to the presence of Jesus. The Pharisees arrive with their annoyance and their plots. They come. Thomas comes into the presence of Jesus with his doubts. A synagogue leader arrives in despair and sorrow. A centurion comes, lost as to how to move forward. A crowd comes anticipating great wisdom on a hillside. Another crowd, as we will look at next week, comes expectant of a king. A mother sits at a wedding and comes hoping for a solution. People continued throughout the Gospels to come to Jesus. And time again, we see the sick and the hurting come looking for a healer. I promise you this, however you have come this morning, it is not going to catch God off guard. We join a very, very long queue of people who have come into his presence. How do we come? This isn't a message of condemnation of how you come. Please hear that. Please hear that. It's a celebration. It's a celebration that you have come at all. You've come with your rubbish. I know some of you well enough to say that out loud without you scorning me. You've come with your hurts. You've come with your anxieties. You've come with your hopes and your dreams and your expectations. You have come. And you will continue to come into the presence of God, carrying all of those things, coming before Jesus with each and every truth of who you are. But have you come expectant? Have you come believing that God can still make a difference? I pray this message will encourage you. The next Sunday and the Sunday after and the Sunday after, that as you put your jacket on in the morning, we'll wear jackets because it will probably rain. As you put your jackets on in the morning, you'll just consider, why am I coming? Don't let it put you off, but why am I coming? Because there is a long list of people who have come before Jesus carrying similar baggage to you. People coming, carrying similar hurts to you. You see, you don't simply come to church. You don't simply come to Moriah on a Sunday morning. You come into the very presence of God. I think it's worth taking a moment as we get ready on a Sunday just to consider, why are we coming? How do we come? Friends, I pray you will come expectant. But if we're coming expectant, we need to come humbly. We need to come expecting that God will speak to us. We need to come with the truth of all that we carry, believing he is strong enough to deal with it. I pray we come knowing we do not need to leave the same way.